So how everyone, until I'm being told to start, how everyone are feeling? Okay? Yeah, can start? Okay, great. So my name is Matan from DAOstack, and I will tell you about holographic consensus and how it can be, useful for scalable DAOs and what scalable DAOs are anyway. Okay, so just a quick reminding about what do we mean by DAOs on the blockchain. So basically, DAOs are composed of two elements, the ownership structure, and then the decentralized governance structure or decentralized governance system to handle that ownership. So by ownership, we mean like there are 4 types of ownership. So external assets, internal assets, external rights, and internal rights. So external asset would be something like the DAO holding in its wallet Ethereum, Ether, or ERC20 tokens, etc. Internal asset would be the DAO managing its own tokens, right? So the DAO can own a token contract and mint tokens on the go. External rights would be, for example, a DAO holding voting power in another DAO, or perhaps the DAO having permission to change the DAOstack platform, just as the DXDAO is going to have in about a month and a half from now. And internal rights, of course, is the reputation system, the internal reputation system of the DAO itself. So what is the governance system then? Think about the machinery. Then there is a pipeline of proposals running through that machinery. Okay? You can propose to the DAO to do anything, maybe to allocate funds, maybe to vote in another DAO, maybe to whitelist tokens on the DAOstack platform, and so on and so forth. And then people vote. So the agents of the DAO, so the reputation holders, would vote yes or no to that proposal. This is the basic scheme where proposals are yes-no proposals. You can have other scheme where the proposals are not just yes-no, but yes-no is the simpler scenario, so we'll start with that. Notice that different votes have different ways. We call that reputation or voting power. So votes are weighted differently. If you don't have reputation, you can still make proposal, but you cannot vote. And then if majority of reputation says no, roughly, you would think of that as the DAO saying no. And if majority of reputation saying yes, you would think of that as the DAO saying yes. So what do we mean now by scalable DAOs, and why should we care? Why should we worry about them? So firstly, scalable in what sense? So scalable in basically all dimensions. So firstly, they should be scalable in the number of voting agents, also known as voters. So many influencers, or if you wish, a wide distribution of power, wide distribution of reputation in the DAO. Then they should be scalable in the number of proposing agents. So not only you have maybe thousands of people voting, but also thousands of people proposing. So it's not just a single person making a proposal once a week and then a lot of people are voting about it, but also many people are proposing, and that's possible because anyone can make a proposal or anyone can make any proposal. So scalable in number of proposing agents, and finally scalable in number of proposals. So that will be the frequency or the throughput of the DAO. So how many decisions in a unit of time, how many decisions every week the DAO is making? That's the throughput. That's the real bottleneck. And by the way, that's not different. We'll talk about it, but we'll talk about the problem soon, and it will not be different from the problem of scalability of blockchain itself. So now, before we dive into more technical details, let's hold for a moment and try to imagine, and it's not easy, it's not trivial. You can close your eyes if you need. Try to imagine 5,000 people collaboratively engage in a DAO, making 5,000 proposals every week. Okay, so many ideas, or every month. Let's say every month. So on average, an agent would have an idea once a month, and we want that DAO to kind of screen through all of those ideas and say if they are good or bad, if they are the best ones, and then implement the best ones of them. Okay. So try to imagine that, how powerful that would be. How many of you feel that you can roughly imagine that scenario? It's completely esoteric, or roughly? Okay, just a few. Okay. Now, if you were able to imagine it very well, deeply, you had to encounter 2 things. Firstly, you need to see that it's very different from any structure that you've seen before. So it's not like a company. It's much more lively and much more harvesting the collective intelligence. Okay? So it'll be a very powerful structure that we haven't seen yet. The second thing that you had to come up with is that there is a big problem in that, really big problem. and in fact, I would say the Beatles' biggest problem, the biggest bottleneck for scalable DAOs, which is the scalability problem. So let's go over the scalability problem. So the scalability problem is an inherent tension between three characteristics, in tension between decentralization, scale, and resilience, and it has nothing to do with, with a specific topic. It's a broad problem. In fact, it's not different from the scalability problem of the blockchain itself. So on the face of it, it means that, at least naively, decentralized governance system cannot be scalable and resilient at the same time, but let's go into details and see what we mean by that and why. So firstly, decentralization. Decentralization means wide distribution of voting power, also known as reputation, in the DAO. So let's say we have 5,000 people, and the reputation is widely distributed such that no less than 1,000 people can achieve a majority. Okay? So it's not 5,000 people and then, majority of reputation held by 10. It's actually at least 1,000 people are needed to compose a majority in the DAO. So this will be a scalable, a decentralized DAO. Then scalability is about the governance throughput. So if you wish, the amount of proposals every week or every unit of time, or the frequency of decisions that are made in that DAO. Okay? So for example, in a very scalable DAO, you would run through hundreds of decisions every week, or thousands of decisions every week. And then finally, resiliency is the fact, it's representativity. So it's the fact that all those decisions actually represent the majority of the DAO. Okay? So although we are running so many decisions in every week, still each of those decisions should be representative and in line with the global majority of reputation in the DAO. Now, of course, if you put it all together, so wide distribution of power, many people, and scalability, many decisions, and resiliency, representativity, you come to the conclusion that, at least naively, you cannot have wide distribution of power deciding very frequently in a very representative manner. Simply cannot. And why so? So firstly, that's a big problem. So it's a big problem for big DAOs. That's the biggest problem. Okay, so this problem, just to say, it's the very fact of scarcity, the natural law of scarcity of attention. And the reasoning is very simple. So if you have lots of fully engaged people, it means that you have lots of proposals. If you have lots of proposals, it means that you have little attention put on each one of them. And then if you have little attention on each one of them, generally speaking, they would not be representative. So if you have 5,000 people and only 10 persons or 50 people are voting on a proposal, 50 people that combinedly comprise, let's say, 1% of reputation in that DAO, there is no reason to believe that that 1% will be representative of the whole DAO. So if we just stop time for a moment, we stop the flow of thousands of proposals, for a moment we stop that, and then we ask all 5,000 people to react just to this proposal, and then we measure whether the little decision was representative of the global majority or not. And in general, there is no reason to believe it will be representative. So that's the problem, that's the reason. Or if put in very simple words, in small DAOs, everyone looks at everything, while as in large DAOs, no one looks at anything. And if maybe putting it in some little picture, so this will be a small DAO, and now we're looking at one proposal, and since there are just a few agents and just a few proposals, then, well, most agents will look on each and every proposal, and as a whole, that will be pretty representative. However, if you look at a larger DAO, and these are not 1,000, these are just 20 nodes, and we want to operate at a thousands level. If you have more nodes, and then also many more proposals, then on average, a proposal will just gain very little fraction of the reputation. And in general, as I said before, will not be representative. So that's the little caricature of the problem. So now the solution, which is just a logical outcome of what I've said so far, it's just, in a way, it's logically the only solution, and we call it holographic consensus, is that DAOs, or large-scale DAOs, scalable DAOs, need to allow for local decisions, and local in the sense that only requiring little attention to put on each one of them, so local decisions, but such that, or which are ensured to be globally representative, so to be in line with a DAO majority of reputation. So this is by definition, right? We need scalability, thus we need to allow for decisions to be made locally by little amount of tension, but we also want resiliency, which by definition means representativity of those decisions of the global majority. So this is just logical outcome. And in drawing, it will be like that. So we have many nodes and many decisions, and indeed still, every decision will just capture very little attention from the DAO. However, there should be that magic that we call holographic consensus, which somehow makes sure that those little decisions over here actually reflect the global majority, even if you didn't directly ask all of those people. If you just stop time and ask them, you would discover that these little decisions or local decisions actually represent the majority. So this will be the drawing for holographic consensus. And again, these local decisions that are ensured to be globally representative, and of course the big question is, but how you do that? It sounds almost impossible, right? So in a very, very summarized form, I'll just say that, and I'll come back to that at the end. I would say that holographic consensus is achieved by turning a social arbitrage into economic arbitrage. So social arbitrage is the situation where those active voters that place their vote do not reflect well the global majority. So we are assuming scalability of the DAO, we are assuming large-scale DAOs, we are assuming decentralization, wide distribution of power, and now we want to ensure for resiliency, which means that we want to avoid the situations of social arbitrage, avoiding the situation where some active voters, in fact, do not reflect well the global majority. So how do we avoid that situation? We're just translating that social arbitrage into economic arbitrage, making that an opportunity, making the opportunity for anyone to make profit from successfully identifying and staking against that mismatch, and then just letting the free market to take care for the rest. And let's see how that works. So I will describe now the Genesis v0.2 protocol, which I would argue that's probably the MVP for holographic consensus. You can still, complify it so much, but this is the, the most advanced version that I think is the minimal viable protocol, such that it doesn't have, collapse attacks or very severe attack vectors. Okay, so there are a few roles in the DAO. So two of them are the regular one. There are proposers and voters. So anyone can make any proposal. You don't need to be a reputation holder in the DAO. It doesn't cost anything. So we want to tap into the collective intelligence. You have an idea for the DAO? Great, just submit your proposal. Then voters, in principle you can vote, but only if you got reputation, you're counted because your vote is weighted by your reputation. So in a way that's less permissionless network, although reputation can be derived from anything. So it can be meritocratic reputation, so it can be a reputation that is given to you when you make contribution to the DAO, but it can also be a more economic of reputation, for example, like hodling. So that you can make a reputation system such that reputation is allocated to you if you're taking your DAO tokens and locking them for 2 years, okay? So that will be more like economic reputation derivation. And then the new actor is the predictors. So it's also a permissionless network. Anyone can place predictions and make a prediction whether a certain proposal will be approved or rejected by the voters. And notice that while voters are being asked what should be done, predictors are just predicting what would happen, okay? What they think the voters will say. So they are independent sectors. So placing prediction on what voters would decide is happening by staking Gen tokens. These are the tokens of the DAOstack project. You can place them in 2 ways. You can stake tokens in 2 ways. You can upstake or downstake a proposal if you think it's going to pass or fail. And then there's the game, the prediction game. And in that game, the right predictors eventually win the Gen stake of the wrong predictors. So if you make a prediction and you found out to be correct, you are going to make profit from those who make the wrong prediction. But now what would give you the incentive to begin? Like if there is a really good proposal, why should I make a prediction that it's good? Because nobody will think it's bad. So for that reason, to bootstrap the prediction game, the DAO itself puts a downstake, like predicting against each and every proposal. Okay, so that's bootstrapping the prediction game. It's like kind of like market making to the prediction game. We call it also the DAOstack, the DAO putting downstake on each and every proposal. Okay, so now what's the process? The process is comprised of 3 steps. There's regular proposals, there is the boosting condition, and there is the boosted proposals. Let's see how it works out. So each and every newly submitted proposal is by default a regular proposal. Regular proposal means that it requires absolute majority of all reputation in order to approve that proposal, which means that by definition it's resilient. But, of course, it's not scalable. And that lives for a long time, let's say for a couple of months, okay? Now, boosted proposal is a new title, okay? The new, if you wish a new stage, a new status. And proposal get boosted, getting that status if they stand in the boosting condition, which we'll see in the next slide. Now, this time it's a shorter voting period, let's say 1 week or 3 days, depending on the use case, and there is guaranteed resolution at the end of that voting period. However, in that voting period, it requires just relative majority of reputation in order to approve that decision. So let's say that out of 5,000 people, just 50 have voted, and let's say just for simplicity, they are all equal reputation holder, just 50 have voted, then if 26 are saying, or more, saying yes, the proposal will be approved and executed. So what's the boosting condition? We said before the DAO downstakes each and every proposals, and then the proposals are being ranked by what we call the predictor's confidence. So that's C, the confidence is the ratio between the total amount of up stakes and the total amount of DAO stakes, including the down stakes of the DAO. Now notice that this is actually the confidence level, meaning that if it's 4, it means that the predictor network, the free market, decided accumulatively that there is a chance of 4 to 1 it's going to pass. And it's really the confidence in the sense that if you think that the chances are 5 to 1, you have an economic incentive, statistically, to actually place more upstake. And if you think that the chances are actually 3 to 1, you have an economic incentive to put more downstake. So this is the cumulative confidence level of the proposals. And if that confidence is sufficiently high, and we'll discuss in what sense, sufficiently high for continuously so for some time, so let's say for 24 hours, it keeps high for continuously for all that time, then and only then the proposal gets boosted. So that threshold, alpha to the power NB, alpha is just a parameter in the DAO. The DAO can change the parameter, but it's a parameter, it's the scaling difficulty parameter. It's a parameter slightly larger than 1, for example, 1.2. And NB is the number of currently boosted proposal. So if you have more boosted proposal right now, it means that you're diluting more the collective attention, which means that it needs to be yet harder to boost another decision, and that's how it comes. It's very protective formula because it's exponential in NB. It could have been more softer, milder formula. This is a very protective, which means that the resilience level will be very high in that DAO, but the scalability will be somewhat stretched. Okay, you can make it, this is a real tension. You can play between scalability and resilience. And finally, resolution. So regular proposals can, well, be resolved in 3 ways. They can either be boosted in that time frame, or they can be resolved with absolute majority. If absolute majority has voted yes or no, it's being resolved. Or it can be dismissed if it times out. Then boosted proposals are always resolved when the voting ends. They're resolved by relative majority. So if relative majority says yes, it's a yes. If they say no, it's a no. Given a quiet ending, we'll come back to that in 2 slides. And then, as we said with the prediction game, right predictors gain the stake of wrong ones. So if you made a wrong prediction, you're losing your stake. If you made a good prediction, you're gaining the stake, the lost stakes of the other ones, and you're gaining it pro rata. And then there is one more thing that I'll just skip. It's about reputation flow. It's somewhat orthogonal to holographic consensus, but early representative voters gain some of the early non-representative voters. It's not very important for that matter. And let's see how representativity comes about. Because the whole purpose of holographic consensus was to argue that we take a DAO, it's decentralized, it's scalable, and now we want to build machinery that also makes it representative or resilient. Okay, so let's argue why we got representativity. So, as we said before, a proposal can be decided by relative majority, and thus the risk of non-representativity only if it gets boosted. So again, if it's not boosted, it means that you need absolute majority, and by definition, it's representative. It can only be decided by relative majority if it got boosted. But then it only got boosted if you got sufficient upstakes predicting that it's going to pass, at least relative to the DAO, to the minimal basic DAO downstake. Now, once you have sufficient upstakes, you have a big economic incentive for the free market to bet against it, to downstake. And now it means that you have, for non-trivial proposals that are not clearly yes or no, you'd have predictors staked on the two sides of its fate. Now the staked predictors have the incentive to ensure representativity. So if they think that in the process of the boosted voting period, if they think that the result, the outcome, is not reflecting the actual global majority, they can call out to the voters they think will shift it to the other way, and they are basically protecting the representativity. And the last thing is that quiet ending requires the outcome of boosted proposal to not to shift at the last stage. I won't get into it right now. Just in a quick drawing, so there is a stream of proposals in the queue of the regular proposals, and then people placing predictions on those proposals. If there is a signal for a proposal to be confident in its passing, then it jumps into the boosting queue. In the boosting queue, proposals are being open for a finite shorter time, where people vote. People actually can also vote before. And then when it times out, there is a decision, etc. So this is the whole process, and tomorrow, or I think 10 o'clock, I will also demo the actual interface that does that. So to wrap it up, just again saying that holographic consensus is achieved by turning a social arbitrage, so the situation where active voters do not reflect well the global majority, into an opportunity, into an economic arbitrage, where anyone can make a profit from successfully identifying and staking against that mismatch, and then again, the free market will take that opportunity. By that closing the economic arbitrage, by that closing the social arbitrage. And again, with that, let's wrap up. Just imagine 5,000 people collaboratively engage in a DAO, proposing 5,000 ideas every week, and meritocratically screening all of them, funding and implementing the best ones. Thank you. Do we have time for like a couple of questions? Yeah? Okay, great.
Hi, thanks a lot for the presentation. I just wanted to know a bit more precisely, how do you attribute reputation in your system?
Right, yeah. So this is a big topic, somewhat orthogonal to this. And again, our infrastructure, our like governance framework is completely agnostic. You can have modules, different modules that are allocating reputation differently. So I can just give you a few examples that we actually implemented, and you can think of many other examples. So the simplest example is just meritocratically. So when you make a contribution to the DAO gives you reputation. When you make a valuable contribution, the DAO allocates you reputation. For example, one way to do that manually is that you're just making a proposal to the DAO to get reputation. So I'm contributing a white paper or that idea or that meetup, and I'm asking from the DAO to get 100 points of reputation, and DAO votes yes or no. If they vote yes, you get that reputation, okay? So that will be like manual meritocratic allocation. Another one which, for example, we've implemented for the DXDAO is more like for hodling. So you have some tokens, maybe that's the DAO's token, maybe some other tokens, and then if you are locking your tokens for, let's say, a year or two, you're gaining reputation. So by that, you're not proving any meritocratic contribution, you are proving your long-term alignment, in a sense, with the DAO. And then you can have many different other modules which are more, more economic or more meritocratic. And then different DAOs can play with different modules. So we have a complete, generic and modular framework. I'll maybe remind that a little bit tomorrow.
Thanks.
But that's a big topic.
Hello. First, I would like to say really awesome holographic consensus. I think this is one of the best things that happened to governance in this space. And I have two questions. One thing that I've been wondering, I don't have an answer at all, is when we speak about scalability and big social consensus, in essence, have you thought about cultural influences? Because probably decision-making processes are different in different cultures. So that would be one question that I have. And the other is, how do you see, how would you compare it? There's a lot of talk here in the community also about liquid democracy. So how would you compare it with holographic consensus?
Great question. So culture in liquid democracy. So let me tell you something about culture. I think about the DAO has a culture. The DAO should have a culture, and if you wish it or not, it will have a culture. So let me actually give you an example. And again, I'll mention that tomorrow. But we ran an experiment with 100 people, about 100 people in our kind of like our own little DAO, which we call the Genesis DAO, which was amazing. And you could have seen in that experiment culture spontaneously emerging. For example, we have put no limit on how much reputation you can ask. And initially people kind of like probe it. They asked 120 score, they had 100, they asked 80. At some point, it just averaged to 100. And if you ask more than 100, people tell you no. Everyone got 100. If you ask more than 100, it's a no. So just completely spontaneous culture. Or initially, people just ask for reputation. They would connect their LinkedIn and say, this is me. And they would actually get a reputation. And over time, people say, no, we don't know that it's you. If you want to do that, confirm, verify your identity. And people needed then to verify their identity to get that reputation. So bottom line, yes, culture is a very important thing in a DAO. You would have a culture in a DAO. You can, when you are founding a DAO, you have the opportunity to, in a way, bias the culture into one or another direction by creating a very strong shilling point. If you're saying, this DAO is founded for that purpose, this is our culture, this is a code of behavior, you cannot enforce that, of course, but you are highly biasing towards that, because then if I think that, those who are in line with that culture will probably buy in, those who are not in line will buy out, and then also if I think that everyone think about that culture as the baseline, I will more likely to behave according to that. So that's a very important topic. The second thing, which is liquid democracy or delegation, is a very important element, and it's just a second layer module on top of that. So in addition to that, this is not the full picture of scalability. Another topic in scalability is compositionality, or imagine just DAOs made of DAOs made of DAOs, or a mesh network of DAOs. So I just described how to scale up a single agency. But now think about a mesh network, an internet of agencies. This is really how that would look like. And inside, and the third element of scalability is, of course, delegation, which is super important, but it can just be a second layer module on top of that.
Thank you, Matan. I have a clarifying question. You mentioned that anyone can make a proposal, but also that every proposal is automatically downstaked. Doesn't that allow people to basically print reputation by just creating proposals that are automatically staked, or is there something that I'm missing?
I didn't hear the full question.
If anyone can make a proposal without reputation, and any proposal is automatically downstaked, so that DAOstack puts reputation against the proposal?
No, it's not DAOstack, it's the DAO itself. It's not putting reputation, it's downstaking with tokens. So Gen tokens, every proposal get downstaked, and then if it's passing, then that DAOstake is lost to the upstakers, which means essentially eventually it's governance cost. So the DAO will lose some, before it will lose some amount of Gen tokens for each successfully approved proposal.
And if it doesn't pass, then there's no cost?
So it cannot pass without cost, because there is real cost here, right? The cost of attention.
Right, but if it doesn't pass, there's no cost. Someone cannot make proposals to take money out of the...
No.
Okay.
Not at all. Okay, thank you very much.